The hotel security guard grabbed Steven Seagal by the arm and yanked him toward the lobby. His grip was tight, aggressive, the kind meant to humiliate. "You thought you could steal from us." "Entice hotel!" Steven didn't resist. He didn't pull away, didn't raise his voice, didn't even flinch. He just looked at the guard calmly, his eyes steady, and said, "Sometimes the loudest accusations come from the quietest guilt." The manager appeared from behind the front desk, his face twisted into a smirk of satisfaction. He was holding something up high, a golden watch, glinting under the chandelier lights. "This was found in your bag during checkout. Grand Meridian Hotel doesn't tolerate thieves." Guests stopped in their tracks. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones came out. Fingers started recording. Whispers rippled through the marble lobby like wildfire. But what none of them knew was that Steven Seagal wasn't just a guest. He was the one who signed their paychecks. He owned the hotel. He owned the entire chain. And in less than 10 minutes, everything they thought they knew about power, respect, and judgment was about to shatter. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. It was a rainy Thursday evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel, a 5-star luxury property in the heart of the city. The kind of place where every detail whispered wealth, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars, velvet curtains draped like royalty, gold-trimmed elevators, leather sofas in the lobby that smelled of money and exclusivity. Everything screamed luxury. Everything screamed power. But behind the glamour, behind the glittering facade, the staff had become something else entirely. They had become arrogant, entitled, cruel, especially manager Derek Finch. Derek walked through the lobby like he owned the place. Chest puffed out, gold cufflinks flashing, Italian shoes clicking sharply against the marble. He barked orders at the front desk staff, dismissed guest complaints with a wave of his hand, flirted shamelessly with wealthy women while ignoring everyone else. His philosophy was simple, and he said it often: premium service is for premium people. If you didn't look rich, you didn't matter. If you didn't arrive in a luxury car, you weren't worth his time. His assistant manager, Vanessa, wasn't much better. She was younger, sharper, and twice as judgmental. She'd stand near the entrance during check-ins, eyeing every guest like a hawk evaluating prey. Designer luggage, smile and upgrade, old suitcase, cold stare and basic room. She judged people by their shoes, their watches, their accents, the way they spoke to the valet. If they don't look rich, she'd whisper to the other staff, they don't deserve our time. The culture had rotted from the top down, but there was one exception, Maria. Maria Santos was a quiet housekeeper in her 50s, small frame, graying hair always tied back neatly, hands worn from years of work. She'd been working at the Grand Meridian for 12 years. 12 long years, and in all that time she had never changed. She treated every guest the same, rich or poor, famous or unknown, rude or kind, it didn't matter to her. She believed in dignity. She believed people deserved respect simply because they were human. But that belief had cost her. She was barely noticed by management, often overlooked for promotions, paid the minimum, worked double shifts when others called in sick, and despite everything, she never complained. That evening, as rain drummed against the tall windows, and the lobby filled with the usual hum of wealth and entitlement, a man checked in alone. No entourage, no assistants, no designer luggage with brand logos stamped all over it. Just a small black duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a calm, quiet presence that didn't demand attention. Steven Seagal. He wore a simple dark jacket, faded jeans, and worn leather boots. His face was weathered but kind. Lines around his eyes that spoke of experience, not vanity. His voice was low, steady, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be heard. At the front desk, the young receptionist barely looked up from her screen. She was scrolling through her phone with one hand, typing with the other. "Name?" she asked, voice flat, eyes still on her phone. "Seagal, Steven." She typed lazily into the system, blowing a bubble with her gum. "Room 407, 4th floor. Elevators that way." No smile. No welcome to the Grand Meridian. "No, we're happy to have you." Just cold, mechanical efficiency. Steven nodded politely and walked toward the elevator, across the lobby. Vanessa watched him with narrowed eyes. She leaned over to Derek, who was adjusting his tie in the reflection of a glass panel. "Another one trying to look mysterious," she whispered with a smirk. "Probably can't even afford the minibar." Derek chuckled, not even bothering to look. Let him enjoy it while it lasts. Tomorrow's checkout will make sure he pays every cent. Maybe even add a few extra fees. They both laughed. Steven heard none of it. Or maybe he did, and simply chose silence over confrontation. He had learned long ago that the loudest response is often no response at all. Upstairs on the 4th floor, Maria was cleaning the hallway. She pushed her cart quietly, replacing towels, checking rooms, doing the invisible work that kept the hotel running. When she saw Steven step out of the elevator, she paused and smiled warmly. "Good evening, sir. If you need anything at all, just let me know." Steven stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, and he smiled back. "Thank you. I appreciate that." It was a small moment, a tiny exchange, but Maria felt it, the warmth of being seen, something most guests never gave her. Steven disappeared into his room, and Maria continued her work, unaware that the man she'd just spoken to would change everything. If you're enjoying this so far, drop a like and tell me, have you ever been judged unfairly based on how you looked? Let me know in the comments the next morning. Steven packed his bag and headed down to the front desk for checkout. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the city air clean and crisp. Inside the lobby, the usual morning rush was underway. Business travelers hurrying out with coffee in hand, tourists gathering near the concierge desk, the sound of rolling luggage echoing across the marble floors. Vanessa was stationed at the front desk, chewing gum loudly, scrolling through her phone with one hand, while tapping keys on the computer with the other. She didn't look up when Steven approached. "Checking out?" she asked in a bored monotone. "Lass, room number 407. She typed slowly, still not making eye contact. Then she pulled up his bill on the screen and smirked. "That'll be $60.20, plus minibar charges, plus incidentals, plus—" oh wait, her fingers stopped. She frowned, leaning closer to the screen. "There's a flag on your account." Steven raised an eyebrow. "A flag? Yeah. Security wants to check your bag before you leave." Her tone had shifted now, sharper, almost gleeful. "Is there a problem?" Steven asked calmly. "We'll see." She picked up the desk phone and spoke into it quietly, her eyes never leaving Steven. Moments later, Derek appeared from the back office, flanked by 2 security guards in black uniforms. Derek's smile was wide and predatory. "Mr. Seagal, we've had reports of missing property from the 4th floor. Standard procedure. We need to inspect your belongings before you leave." Guests nearby began to slow down, sensing something was happening. A few stopped entirely, pretending to check their phones while watching from the corner of their eyes. Steven didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, his voice steady. "Go ahead." One of the guards stepped forward, a tall, heavy-set man with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl. He grabbed Steven's duffel bag without asking and unzipped it roughly. He rummaged through it with zero care, clothes tossed aside. A book flipped open and dropped. Toiletries pulled out and examined. Then, at the very bottom of the bag, wrapped carefully in a white hotel towel, a gold wristwatch. The guard pulled it out slowly, holding it up like a trophy. Derek's eyes lit up. His face practically glowed with satisfaction. Well, well, well. What do we have here?" He snatched the watch from the guard's hand and held it high above his head so everyone in the lobby could see. Guests turned. Whispers started. Phones came out. "This," Derek announced loudly, his voice dripping with false authority, "is hotel property. A guest reported it missing yesterday from the executive lounge." Steven's voice remained even. "I've never been to the executive lounge, right?" Derek said with a mocking laugh. "And I suppose this just appeared in your bag by magic." The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Is that guy stealing from the hotel?" Another voice, "Looks familiar, wait, isn't he that actor?" A third, "No way, that's just some random guy." Vanessa folded her arms across her chest, her smirk widening into something ugly. "Told you," she said to one of the other staff members loud enough for Steven to hear. "Cheap luggage, cheap morals." Steven's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed level, controlled, calm. "I didn't take that watch." Derek laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Sure you didn't. That's what they all say." He turned to the guards, puffing out his chest. "Detain him. Call the police. Grand Meridian Hotel has zero tolerance for theft. We protect our guests and our reputation." One of the guards hesitated, glancing at Steven, then back at Derek. "Sir, shouldn't we review the security footage first?" "Standard protocol." Derek cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Footage? We have the evidence right here, in his bag." "Now do your job or I'll find someone who will." The guard's face hardened, but he stepped toward Steven. Steven stood completely still, hands at his slides, breathing slow, steady. He could have argued. He could have pulled rank right then and there. He could have told them exactly who he was and watched their faces crumble in real time. But he didn't. Because sometimes, the truth is better delivered when arrogance has nowhere left to hide. Maria had just come down the service stairs, carrying a fresh stack of linens. She froze when she saw the commotion. Her eyes went wide. Her face went pale. Mr. Seagal. Derek whipped around and glared at her. Stay out of this, Maria, unless you want to lose your job too. His voice was a threat, sharp, cold, final. Maria's hands trembled, clutching the linens tighter. But she didn't look away from Steven, and in his eyes she saw something. Not fear, not anger, not panic, just patience. The kind that comes from knowing the storm will pass. The kind that comes from experience, from wisdom, from understanding that the loudest voices are often the most fragile. Derek turned back to the crowd, playing to his audience now. Let this be a lesson, he said dramatically. No one, and I mean no one, steals from the Grand Meridian and gets away with it. The guards moved closer to Steven. One reached for his arm, and just as his hand was about to make contact, the main entrance doors opened, and everything changed. What do you think happens next? Should Steven speak up now, or wait and let them dig their own grave? Comments PAQP or night. Let's see what you'd do. The police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers stepped through the revolving doors into the lobby, one older, one younger, both in crisp uniforms with badges gleaming under the chandelier lights. The older officer was Sergeant Mills, gray hair, calm eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen it all and wasn't easily impressed. The younger one was Officer Dawson, eager, notebook already in hand, ready to prove himself. Derek immediately straightened his tie and put on a performance. He walked toward them with exaggerated urgency, his voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. Officers, thank you for coming so quickly. This man, he pointed directly at Steven, stole property from our hotel, a valuable watch worth over $8,000. Sergeant Mills looked at Steven, then back at Derek, then at the watch still clutched in Derek's hand. You have proof? Mills asked, his tone neutral. Derek held up the watch triumphantly, like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. Right here. Found in his bag during checkout. Clear evidence. Mills didn't take the watch. He just looked at it. Then he turned to Steven. Is this true, sir? Steven met his gaze directly. No guilt. No fear, just calm. The watch was in my bag. But I didn't put it there. Vanessa let out a loud, exaggerated laugh from behind the desk. Oh, please. What, it just walked in? A few guests chuckled nervously. Officer Dawson stepped forward, reaching for his handcuffs. But Sergeant Mills raised a hand. Hold on, let's not rush this. Dawson frowned but stopped. Mills turned back to Derek, his expression unreadable. You said the watch was reported missing yesterday. Do you have a report filed? Derek hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Well, not officially filed yet, but... And do you have security footage of the theft? Derek's confidence flickered. Why, we're still reviewing it. Mills crossed his arms. So you're accusing this man based solely on the watch being in his bag, but you have no footage of him taking it, and no official theft report. Derek's face reddened. Look, it's obvious what happened here. What's obvious? Mills interrupted calmly but firmly. Is that you're making a serious accusation without evidence. That's a dangerous thing to do, sir. The crowd shifted. Whispers grew louder. Vanessa stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Officer, we know our guests. This man checked in alone, no credit card on file, paid cash up front. Mills raised an eyebrow. So paying in cash is a crime now? Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. Steven finally spoke. His voice quiet but firm, clear, unshaken. I'd like to see the security footage, all of it. From the moment I checked in until now. Derek's face went from red to pale in an instant. That's not necessary, actually, Mills said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I think it is. Let's go to your security office. Now. Derek looked like he'd swallowed glass, but he had no choice. He nodded stiffly and led the way. The crowd followed, guests pressing closer, staff members abandoning their posts, even Maria, still clutching her linens like a lifeline. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. In the cramped security office on the second floor, the air was thick with tension. Monitors lined the walls, displaying dozens of camera feeds from all over the hotel. The head of security, a nervous man named Paul with thinning hair and sweat on his forehead, sat at the main console. His hands were shaking. Where do you want me to start? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 4th floor hallway. Steven said calmly. Yesterday evening, Paul typed quickly, pulling up the footage. The screen filled with a black and white view of the hallway outside room 407. He fast-forwarded through hours of footage. Steven entering his room at 6:17 p.m., leaving for dinner at 7:45 p.m., returning late at 10:52 p.m. Nothing suspicious, just a man coming and going. Then Paul froze. His eyes widened.
Wait, what's that?
He rewound a few seconds and pressed play. At exactly 11:47 p.m., a figure appeared in the hallway. Someone in a hotel uniform, dark vest, white shirt, name tag glinting under the hallway lights. They looked around carefully. Left. Right. Making sure no one was watching. Then they pulled out a keycard, swiped it on room 407's door, and slipped inside. The timestamp continued. 30 seconds passed. Then the door opened again. The same figure stepped out, empty-handed going in, holding something small going out. Paul zoomed in on the face. The image sharpened, and there she was, Vanessa. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the monitors, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes darted between the screen and Vanessa, who stood frozen near the door. Her face had drained of all color. Sergeant Mills turned slowly to face her, his expression stone cold. Care to explain? Vanessa's hands started shaking. Her lips trembled. I was just checking the room for what? Steven asked quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Something to plant. Her breath hitched. Tears welled up in her eyes. No, I swear, I didn't, Mills ordered, his voice hard now. Paul didn't hesitate. He scrolled back further, to earlier that afternoon, 20:34 p.m., Executive Lounge. The camera showed Vanessa walking through the lounge, straightening chairs, checking tables. Then she stopped at one table near the window. She glanced around. No one was looking. She reached down, picked up a gold watch sitting on a stack of magazines, and slipped it smoothly into her vest pocket. Casual. Practiced. Like she'd done it before. Paul kept the footage rolling. Hours later, 11:47 p.m., there she was again, sneaking into Steven's room and hiding the watch in his bag. The evidence was undeniable. Derek stared at the screen, his carefully built arrogance crumbling in real time. Vanessa, what the hell did you do? She broke. Completely. Tears streamed down her face, her voice cracking. I needed the money? Okay. I was going to sell it, but then I panicked. And I thought if I framed someone no one would care about. You thought you'd frame an innocent man to cover your own theft. Mills finished for her, his voice filled with disgust. Vanessa sobbed, covering her face with her hands. But no one felt sorry for her. Not the staff, not the guests, not even Derek, who now looked more terrified than angry. Steven looked at her, not with anger, but with something sadder. Disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment. You could have just asked for help. Mills pulled out his handcuffs. Vanessa Crane, you're under arrest for theft and filing a false accusation. He cuffed her wrists as she sobbed uncontrollably. Officer Dawson read her rights, while she was led out through the security office door, past the crowd, toward the lobby. Guests recorded on their phones, staff members whispered. And Derek stood frozen in the middle of it all, humiliated, his carefully constructed image shattered in front of everyone. But Steven wasn't done, and neither was the story. Drop a comment if you saw that twist coming, and stay tuned. Because what happens next is even better. The lobby was still buzzing with energy when Sergeant Mills turned to Derek. His expression was firm, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Manager, I'd advise you to apologize to this man, publicly. Derek's jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscles working beneath his skin. His pride wrestled with his fear. His ego screamed at him to defend himself, to make excuses, to deflect blame, but his survival instinct knew better. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he forced the words out through gritted teeth. Mr. Seagal, I apologize. It was a misunderstanding. The words sounded hollow, empty, like reading from a script he didn't believe in. Steven looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were calm but piercing, measuring, judging, a misunderstanding. Steven repeated slowly, his voice quiet but heavy with meaning. You accused me of being a thief in front of dozens of people. You had me detained. You called the police. You didn't even wait for evidence. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his eyes dropping to the floor. I was just doing my job. No. Steven interrupted, his tone sharpening just slightly. You were protecting your ego. Derek's fists clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. He couldn't, because deep down he knew Steven was right. Steven turned toward the exit, picking up his duffel bag from where it had been left on the front desk. The crowd began to disperse, guests murmuring to each other, staff returning slowly to their stations. It seemed like the story was over. But then, the main entrance doors opened. A woman in a sharp black suit walked in, her heels clicking purposefully against the marble floor. She had the kind of presence that made everyone stop talking. Confident, commanding, undeniable. Behind her, 2 assistants followed, both carrying sleek leather briefcases. Every head in the lobby turned. She scanned the room quickly, her eyes landing on Steven Seagal. She called out, her voice clear and professional, cutting through the lingering whispers. "We've been looking for you." Steven smiled faintly, a knowing look crossing his face. "I told you I'd handle it myself, Lisa." Derek blinked, confusion spreading across his face. "Wait, you know her?" Lisa Grant, dressed impeccably, not a hair out of place, exuding authority with every step, walked straight up to Steven and extended her hand. He shook it warmly. "I apologize for the delay, sir," she said smoothly. "We would have been here sooner, but traffic was absolutely terrible coming from headquarters." "It's fine," Steven said calmly. "I wanted to see how things were running firsthand." Derek's face went from confusion to pale realization. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Wait, what?" Lisa turned to face the entire lobby, her posture perfect, her voice calm but commanding enough to silence every remaining whisper. "For those who don't know, allow me to introduce Steven Seagal, actor, martial artist, philanthropist, and as of 3 months ago, majority shareholder and owner of the Meridian Hotel Group." The lobby erupted gasps, sharp intakes of breath, whispers exploding into full conversations, phones lifted higher, recording furiously. Someone near the back shouted, "I can, oh, he looked familiar?" Another guest whispered loudly, "Oh my God, that's actually him." Derek looked like he'd been hit by a freight train. His face went from pale to gray. His legs wavered slightly, like they might give out. "You own?" Steven nodded, his expression neutral. 12 hotels across 4 countries, he said quietly, almost casually, including this one. Vanessa, still in handcuffs near the entrance with Officer Dawson, let out a broken, anguished sob. Her knees buckled slightly, and the officer had to steady her. Lisa continued, completely unfazed by the chaos around her. Her voice remained professional, measured, precise. "Mr. Seagal prefers to visit his properties incognito. He believes the best way to understand a business, to truly see how it operates, is to experience it as a guest, not as a boss." She paused, letting that sink in. Then she looked directly at Derek. Her gaze was ice, cold, and based on what I've just witnessed here today, I'd say this location has some very serious management issues. Derek stammered, his hands trembling. "Ma'am, I can explain." "Explain what?" Lisa's voice was sharp now, cutting through his panic like a scalpel. "That you publicly humiliated the owner of your hotel. That you allowed theft to occur under your watch. That you treated a guest like a criminal without a single shred of evidence. I didn't know. And that," Steven said, stepping forward, his voice quiet but carrying weight, "is exactly the problem." He looked around the room, at the guests still watching, at the staff frozen in place, at the security guards who had manhandled him minutes earlier. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with respect." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward, settling into every corner of the lobby. He continued, his tone calm but firm. "Respect isn't something you give only to people with power. It's not something you reserve for the wealthy, the famous, the influential." He paused. "It's something you give because it's right." The silence was deafening. Even the guests who had been recording lowered their phones slightly, caught up in the moment. Maria, standing near the back of the crowd, had tears streaming down her face. Her hands were pressed to her chest. Steven noticed her. His expression softened. "You?" Maria flinched, her eyes going wide. "Me, sir? What's your name?" "Maria?" "Maria Santos." "How long have you worked here, Maria?" 12 years, sir." Steven nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "And in those 12 years, how have you been treated?" Maria hesitated, her eyes darting nervously toward Derek. He was glaring at her, his jaw clenched, silently warning her to stay quiet. But Steven saw it. "It's okay," Steven said gently, his voice warm and reassuring. "Tell the truth." Maria took a shaky breath. Her voice was soft at first, trembling. "I've been ignored, overlooked, told I'm lucky to even have a job here." Her voice grew steadier. "I work doubles when people call in sick. I cover shifts no one else wants. I've never gotten a raise. Never been promoted." She paused, tears threatening to spill over again. And last year, when my son was in the hospital with pneumonia, I asked for 2 days off. Just 2 days. Her voice cracked. I was told I'd be replaced if I left. The room fell completely silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic outside. Nothing else. Steven's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. A quiet, cold anger simmering beneath the surface. He turned to Lisa. Effective immediately. I want a full audit of this location. Staff treatment, wage distribution, management conduct, workplace culture, everything. Understood, sir. Then he looked directly at Derek. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. You're suspended. Pending investigation. If we find more issues, and I suspect we will, you're done. Derek opened his mouth to protest, to argue, to defend himself, but nothing came out. He looked around desperately for support, but found none. The staff wouldn't meet his eyes. The guests just stared. Even the security guards stepped back slightly. Steven turned back to Maria, and what he said next changed her life forever. As of today, you're promoted to assistant manager, with full benefits, a significant pay increase, and 2 weeks paid leave to spend with your family. Maria's hands flew to her mouth. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Sir, I don't know what to say. Steven's expression softened into a genuine smile. You don't have to say anything, Maria. You've earned it. The staff, the real staff, the ones who worked in the shadows, the housekeepers, the kitchen crew, the maintenance workers started clapping, slowly at first, hesitant, then louder, then thunderous. The guests joined in. Even Sergeant Mills gave a respectful nod. Steven didn't bask in it. He simply picked up his bag, nodded to Lisa, and walked toward the exit. But before he reached the door, he stopped, and he turned back one last time. What do you think he says? Drop your guess in the comments, and let's see who gets it right. Steven stood in the doorway, his back to the crowd, the morning light streaming through the glass doors behind him, his silhouette framed against the brightness. For a moment, he said nothing. Just stood there, letting the silence settle. Then his voice carried across the marble lobby, quiet, but clear enough for everyone to hear. I didn't buy these hotels to make money. Everyone froze. The applause died instantly. Guests stopped mid-step. Staff members turned confused. Even Lisa looked surprised. Steven turned around slowly, his expression contemplative, his eyes sweeping across the faces gathered before him, staff and guests alike. I bought them because I stayed in one 15 years ago. When I had nothing, you could hear a pin drop. The air felt heavy, sacred almost, like he was about to share something deeply personal, something real. I was broke. Steven continued, his voice steady but filled with memory. Jobless. My career had stalled. I'd lost most of my savings to bad investments and worse advice. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. I was sleeping in my car most nights. A beat-up sedan with a broken heater. Winter in Chicago. Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the story they expected. One night, I scraped together enough cash for a cheap motel room. $43. That's all I had left. His eyes grew distant, like he was watching the memory play out in front of him. The motel was run down, paint peeling off the walls, flickering neon sign that buzzed all night, but it had a bed and a roof, and that's all I needed. He smiled faintly. I walked into the lobby around midnight. I looked rough. 3 days without a shower, clothes wrinkled and dirty. I smelled like desperation and failure. Maria's breath caught. Her hand moved to her chest. The receptionist could have turned me away. Steven said quietly. She could have told me they were full, or that I didn't have enough money, or a dozen other excuses. He looked directly at Maria now, but she didn't. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She smiled at me. A real smile, not fake, not forced, just kind. Steven's voice softened even more. She gave me a room. Didn't ask questions, didn't judge, didn't make me feel small. He took a slow breath. And when I checked out the next morning, planning to get back in my car and figure out where to go next, there was a bag waiting for me at the desk. The lobby was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Inside was a sandwich, turkey and cheese wrapped in foil, a bottle of water, an apple, and a handwritten note. Steven's voice cracked just slightly, almost imperceptibly. But it was there. The note said, keep going. You're stronger than you think. Someone believes in you. Maria's hands were shaking now, pressed against her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Steven looked at her, his expression gentle, filled with gratitude and something deeper, reverence. That woman's name was Elena Santos. Maria gasped audibly, a sob escaping her throat. Her knees weakened, and a staff member next to her quickly steadied her. "She was my mother?" Maria whispered, barely able to get the words out. Steven nodded slowly. "She was." Tears poured down Maria's face. She couldn't hold them back anymore. Steven walked toward her, closing the distance between them, the crowd parting silently to let him through. "She passed away 5 years ago," Steven said softly, standing in front of her now. "But I never forgot what she did." His voice was thick with emotion. "She didn't know me. She didn't know me anything. She had every reason to ignore me or judge me or turn me away." He paused. "But she treated me like I mattered." Maria sobbed openly now, her entire body shaking. Steven placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And when I found out her daughter worked here for 12 years, underpaid, overlooked, disrespected, treated like she didn't matter, I knew I had to see it for myself." Maria looked up at him through her tears, her voice breaking. You came here? Because of my mother." "I came here because of people like your mother," Steven said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "People who show kindness when no one's watching. People who give dignity when the world takes it away. People who believe in humanity even when humanity fails them." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "Your mother saved me that night. Not with money, not with power, not with connections." He paused, his eyes glistening. "With respect." The entire room was silent. Some guests were openly wiping their eyes. Staff members stood frozen, many of them crying as well. Even Derek, standing off to the side in disgrace, looked shaken. His face pale, his arrogance completely stripped away, perhaps humbled for the first time in years. Steven stepped back slightly and addressed the room one final time. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight. "I don't care how much money someone has. I don't care what car they drive, what clothes they wear, what neighborhood they come from, or what their last name is." He looked around, making eye contact with as many people as he could. "In my hotels, every guest will be treated with respect. Every worker will be valued. Every human being will be seen." He let that hang in the air for a moment. Then his gaze landed on Derek. "You had a chance to lead with integrity. You chose arrogance. You chose cruelty. You chose to make people feel small so you could feel big." Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "That's on you." Steven turned back to Lisa. "I want Maria trained for full management within 6 months. I want every housekeeper, every cook, every janitor, every person who keeps this building running. I want them given a performance review, and I want raises for those who deserve it. Consider it done, sir. And I want a confidential hotline set up so staff can report misconduct, abuse, or unsafe conditions without fear of retaliation." Lisa nodded sharply, already making notes on her phone. Immediately, Steven turned back to Maria, his expression warm and filled with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Maria broke down completely, and Steven pulled her into a gentle, fatherly hug. She sobbed into his shoulder, years of exhaustion and pain and gratitude pouring out all at once. The staff erupted into applause again, but this time it was different. This time it was real, heartfelt, thunderous, not for a celebrity, not for a billionaire, but for a man who remembered what it felt like to be invisible, for a man who chose to see people, for a man who understood that power without compassion is just cruelty in a suit. Steven released Maria gently, gave her one more warm smile, and finally headed for the door. As he stepped outside into the fresh morning air, Sergeant Mills followed him. "Mr. Seagal." Steven stopped and turned. Mills extended his hand. "That was a good thing you did in there." Steven shook his hand firmly. "It was the right thing." Mills nodded, respect clear in his eyes. "We need more people like you in this world." Steven smiled faintly, but shook his head. "No, Sergeant. We need more people like Maria. And her mother." He paused. "They're the real heroes. They're the ones who keep the world turning when no one's watching." Mills nodded slowly, understanding. Steven walked to his car, a modest black sedan, nothing flashy, nothing meant to impress. He got in, started the engine, and drove away, no fanfare, no parade, no cameras following him. Just a man who understood that real power isn't about being seen. It's about seeing others. If this story moved you, type RIFT in the comments, and tell me, have you ever met someone who changed your life with a small act of kindness? Share your story below. 3 months later, the Grand Meridian Hotel looked the same on the outside, same marble facade, same towering glass doors, same crystal chandeliers visible through the windows. But inside, everything had changed. Maria Santos stood behind the front desk, not as a housekeeper anymore, but as the new general manager, She wore a crisp navy suit, perfectly tailored, her graying hair styled professionally, pinned back with elegant simplicity. But the most noticeable change wasn't her clothes. It was her smile. Warm, genuine, confident. The smile of someone who finally felt seen. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the Grand Meridian," she said brightly to the next guest in line. "How can I help you today?" The guest in front of her was a young man in his early 20s, worn sneakers, faded jeans, a hoodie with a backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked tired, nervous, like someone who wasn't sure if he belonged. "I have a reservation," he said hesitantly. "But I'm not sure if—" "You're not sure if what?" Maria asked kindly, her voice patient and encouraging. He shifted his weight, glancing down at his clothes. "If I'm dressed okay. I just got off a long flight, and I didn't have time to change. I know this place is fancy and Maria smiled warmly and leaned forward slightly. "You're perfect just the way you are. Let me check you in." His shoulders relaxed immediately. The tension drained from his face. Really, Maria said, already typing into the computer. "We're happy to have you here." He smiled, a small, grateful smile. That was the culture now. Under Maria's leadership, everything had shifted. The staff had been retrained, not in fake corporate smiles or scripted greetings, but in something far more important: empathy, respect, seeing people, not profiles. The lobby felt different now, warmer, more human. Guests were greeted by name. Staff took time to listen. Complaints were handled with care, not dismissal. It wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a place where people felt welcome, where they felt valued. Derek, he was let go 2 weeks after the investigation concluded. The audit revealed years of complaints buried in files, unpaid overtime that was never addressed, workplace bullying that had been ignored, staff members who had left because of his behavior. He didn't fight it. He packed his office in silence and walked out, the same doors he'd strutted through for years, head down, humiliated, powerless. Vanessa was sentenced to 6 months in jail, suspended, with 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. The gold watch was returned to its rightful owner, who hadn't even realized it was missing until the police called. And Steven. He visited twice more over those 3 months, always unannounced, always low-key, always as just another guest. Each time he saw the changes, heard the stories, met the staff members who now felt safe, valued, seen. On his last visit, he sat down with Maria in her new office, a bright, windowed space on the second floor overlooking the lobby. She poured him a cup of coffee, her hands steady now, no longer trembling with uncertainty. "You've done incredible work here," Steven said, looking around the office with approval. Maria smiled softly. "I learned from the best." Steven raised an eyebrow.
"Who?"
"My mother," Maria said, her voice filled with warmth and pride. "And you?" Steven shook his head gently. "I didn't do much. You did everything," Maria said firmly, leaning forward. "You reminded me that kindness isn't weakness, that respect isn't optional, and that how you treat people when no one's watching, that's who you really are." Steven looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile, full of quiet pride. "Good," he said softly. "And don't let anyone else forget it either." Maria nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "I won't." Steven stood, finishing his coffee, and shook her hand firmly. "Take care of this place, Maria, and take care of yourself." "I will. Thank you, Mr. Seagal, for everything." He nodded once, then walked out of her office and down the stairs into the lobby. But this time, he didn't leave quietly. This time, as he crossed the marble floor toward the exit, every single staff member stopped what they were doing. The front desk clerks, the bellhops, the concierge, the housekeeping staff, the kitchen crew who had come out just to see him. And they applauded, slowly at first, then building into something powerful, something real. Not because he was a celebrity, not because he was their boss, but because he had reminded them what it felt like to be human. Steven didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't make a speech. He just smiled, nodded respectfully, and walked out the doors into the sunlight. And as the doors closed behind him, Maria stood at the top of the stairs, watching him go, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. This story isn't just about Steven Seagal. It's about every person who's been judged unfairly, every worker who's been overlooked, every act of kindness that goes unnoticed, until it changes everything. The next time you walk into a hotel, a restaurant, a store, a coffee shop, remember this: the way you treat people says more about you than it ever will about them. Respect isn't something you earn by being powerful. It's something you give because you're human, And sometimes, the person you underestimate today might be the one who changes your life tomorrow, or the one who already changed someone else's. So treat people with dignity, with kindness, with respect, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And type respect in the comments if you believe kindness is the greatest power we have. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear from every corner of the world. And let me know which part of this story hit you the hardest. Was it the twist with Vanessa? The reveal that Steven owned the hotel? The backstory with Maria's mother? Or the final message about treating people with dignity? Your feedback helps us create even better stories, because these aren't just videos. They're reminders, lessons, moments that make us think, feel, and maybe, just maybe, treat each other a little better. More powerful stories are coming soon. Stories that inspire, stories that matter. Stay tuned, stay kind. And remember, true strength is silent, true power is seeing others. See you in the next one.